Now, for more is Hafed al-Ghwell, a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Rafik Hariri Center for the Middle East. And from California, Omar Turbi, he's a Libyan activist and political analyst. Also with me in the studio is Manor Omar, Associate Vice President for the Middle East and Africa Center at the United States Institute of Peace. Thank you all so much for joining us. Let's start in California. Omar Turbi, you were very much involved at the outset of getting the West and others to look at Libya's plight while Muammar Gaddafi was in power. What a change in just a few years. Is Libya heading to being a failed state?
In my opinion, it is a failed state now. Before coming to the studio, there was an article out there that talks about the government in Tobruk or the East trying to lure oil buying companies to buy oil directly from them and bypass the NOC in Tripoli. So which means that there's a definite problem with where the resources of the country are going and budgets, spending. I would say it is a chaotic state. And obviously, you know, we can't just sit here and blame Western nations and the world community that rescued Libya from the old dictatorship now and say they could have done better. It's always the case that they could have done more and could have done better than they have done, but they definitely let things go. The policy of the United States, Europe now is in limbo when it comes to dealing with the whole entire region. They've tested situations and how to deal with chaotic regimes like in Yemen, and they failed there, and they're trying to maybe do something similar in Libya, not thinking just a short history ago things didn't work in Yemen. So it's hard to say where Libya is going forward.
Well, Manal, let me bring you in here, because what we've got really is a tale of two governments, as we said from the top. We've got the House of Representatives, which is internationally recognised in Tobruk, which is not the traditional capital, Tripoli, where we have the General National Congress. So two governments, but also all these militias, and of course ISIL as well, now even claiming Gaddafi's old hometown of Sirte. What is going on here?
Well, I think what you're seeing is very typical in terms of post-transition, which is really trying to understand what is the role of government and what's the role of state. With the fall of an authoritarian regime, you had the emergence of the need to negotiate a new social contract. And in some people's opinions, that social contract is about moral authority, who actually controls the street, who represents the people, who's able to provide services.
And the resources, too.
And the resources. And of course, in other people's mind, they're also pointing out that in the transition, there were elections. So elections is what provides legitimacy. And of course, you have something like the Islamic State, which is coming out with a very strong extremist definition of state, which is also trying to lay claim to having some type of legitimacy. All these type of fights for legitimacy has created a vacuum of power, and you're just seeing Libya open up in terms of arms smuggling, in terms of violence, things that have really been unprecedented in that country before. And as you know, it sits on the corner in terms of the gates into Europe, so it really has regional and global effect.
Yeah, let's talk to Hafed about that. Hafed al-Ghwell, I'm going to bring you in here. So we've got ISIL there. There's a migrant crisis in Europe where tens of thousands are coming directly from Libya because basically there is no state institutions and the government is reticent to use their resources against it. We also have calls for the UN arms embargo to be lifted and a shaky peace process. Do you see any hope going forward?
Not with this process, no.
Why?
I think it's basically we are in a circle that is entirely controlled and monopolized by the same group of people who were allies of yesterday against the Gaddafi regime, and today they're basically fighting like thieves over the spoils. These are not new characters that are sitting with Leon. They are the same people who supported the entire process from the beginning to now, and they've been a part of this direction that Libya has taken and has reached this integration point. The problem is, everybody's focused on these governments in the East and the West and ISIL. There are 1,000 governments in Libya. It's not these three. These are maybe the sort of the larger ones that everybody can focus on. But every street corner has a government. Every village has a government, because each one of them is a militia-controlled, either a criminal gang or an ideological militia or a politically motivated militia or a militia proxy of a regional government. It is a complete mess. Somebody needs to start from scratch and say, let's start this process from the beginning.
Omar, Turbi, I want you to pick up on that. Do you agree that the politicians have no power and it's the militias on every street corner, as Hafed just said? In which case, is the UN-backed peace process, which, let's face it, still isn't agreed upon by the two governments, let alone all the militias, doomed?
Well, for sure, there is a lot of chaos. And in the absence of solid institutions in the country, would it be police force, security, military, legislative power, enforcement of laws, obviously you would have people that are running around. There's definite crime that has nothing to do with religion or has nothing to do with political agenda. And the one big component that has always been important in shaping or bringing about peace or security in any country in the region is the United Nations Security Council, that's made up of those 5 security members. Then the United States, that sometimes unilaterally takes decisions in the region. Some of the European nations like France and England are all holding back and looking to see what may emerge. Well, they want to support a political process in Libya, but they don't want to intervene neither militarily or with some type of force. In the meantime, and there's another important factor here, right. And frankly, when we dig deeper to see if Western nations know exactly what's happening on the ground, or what are all these Islamic extremists, non-extremists working together, frankly, they do not have intimate understanding of what's going on with these groups.
But now, I just want you to pick up on that, and also you have Hafed as well. Is it a case the West got it wrong, intervening and then taking their eye off it, or is it more complicated than that?
It's always much more complicated than that. I think the biggest challenge is most people assume that conflict is linear, that you're going to see some type of progression. Unfortunately, conflict doesn't work that way. You may see some improvements, and then something will happen where we're completely off track and we've taken 10 steps behind. I think that's the case in Libya. We have seen improvements, we have seen movement, but the overwhelming macro political situation is so bad that it has continuously pulled the country into chaos. But I wouldn't place blame on one group.
Hafed, the internationally recognized government has asked for a lifting of the UN arms embargo. Would that lead to more chaos, considering the guns could fall into the hands of ISIL?
Yes, I mean, that would be an absolute disaster.
So what's the way forward?
But let me just, for one minute, to support what Manal was saying, it is, I mean, conflict is never linear, and it's not the fault of the West, except in the following sense, is that after Afghanistan, after Iraq, after other conflicts, including Somalia to some extent, Lebanon, Kosovo, and others, one would have expected the international community, and NATO in particular, to have learned its lesson. That's what's the shocking part of this.
Well, there was a big fight in the Security Council about what that intervention meant.
Well, what I'm saying is...
what's that lesson?
Exactly. Nobody thought of the future, and they counted on a bunch of people who are self-proclaimed and named themselves the National Transitional Council, of characters that are really, until that point, were not known in Libya. And somehow the rest, the Friends of Libya group, headed by Secretary Hillary Clinton at that time, decided to give them recognition. Now, to come back to the issue of armament, it is a complete nonsense. And this is where the danger, I think, of recognizing the government in Tobruk is. By simply maintaining that recognition, the international community is giving legitimacy to this claim that we are the right government and you need to give us arms. The problem is that military that is under that government is really a collection of militias themselves.
Like everywhere.
Like everywhere. So by allowing them to be armed, you are in a sense taking a position with one militia against all the others.